Hey plant fam! Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Jaclynn. This is my jungle, and if you're not new here, thank you so much for coming back. I really appreciate you for still being here. You're awesome. So today I wanted to answer the question, what in the heckin' bob is sport variegation? Because every time I'm out plant shopping and I talk about sport hunting, you guys are like, what is sport variegation? And that is a very good question. But it's a question that I cannot answer without first tackling the topic of what is variegation in the first place. If we don't understand how variegation happens, then it's going to be really hard to understand what sport variegation is. So there are 4 really basic different types of variegation. You can definitely tack on like more, but the 4 that I'm going to talk about today are the most common and the ones that we are most familiar with. So the first one on the list is definitely going to be the most common, and this is where sport variegation is going to fall, and that is chimeral or chimerical. I've seen people pronounce it that way as well. Variegation. So basically, this is the type of variegation that we're used to seeing on Monstera. This is going to be your marbly variegations, your half moon variegation, the very unpredictable type of variegation that we normally see on aeroids, which means that every leaf is going to look different, and we are aware that this type of variegation is unstable. That is why there's a fear with a lot of aeroids with this type of variegation that they can revert, because this type of variegation is very spontaneous within the genetics of the plant. So variegation in and of itself is defined by a lack of chlorophyll in the leaf tissue, which is why it's not green. In case you didn't know, chlorophyll is what makes plants green, and chlorophyll is necessary for plants to photosynthesize. So when we have white spots and yellow spots, creamy spots on our plants, that is part of the leaf tissue that does not have any chlorophyll. And this can happen in nature for any number of reasons. Some science actually suggests that plants do this intentionally to make themselves look sick so that pests will bypass that particular plant, because in nature, certain pests can actually recognize when a plant has a viral infection based on the patterning of the leaves. As you guys know, I've talked about in previous videos that viral infections in your plant can actually cause a different type of variegation to happen as well. So it's really interesting to think that in nature, a lot of this variegation actually spontaneously happens because plants are smart enough to know, hey, if we make ourselves look sick, then the bugs are actually more likely to leave us alone, which I think is really, really fascinating and really, really cool. So it's important to understand that this type of variegation is unstable. Every single Monstera albo, every Tycon, all of your variegated philodendron, that is unstable. There is always a very slight chance that those plants can revert back to full green. So with that said, that means that if you propagate this type of plant with chimeral variegation, you have to make sure that the propagation itself actually contains some of that variegated DNA, or else the variegation will not continue with the new plant. So the main takeaway that I want you to understand about this type of variegation is that it is unstable and it is spontaneous. It's really important to understand that aspect of chimeral variegation, because this is where sport variegation happens. So sport variegation is literally just defined by random, spontaneous variegation that happens within a plant. And usually it's a plant that was previously all green, did not come from a variegated mother, was not propagated from a variegated plant, but that does not mean that plants cannot just spontaneously become variegated, and that is what we tend to call sport variegation. And because sport variegation doesn't always necessarily follow the same rules as a lot of the other plants that have been cultivated. So something that is important to understand about, I use Monstera as an example because I feel like it's a really easy thing to wrap your head around. You have your albos, you have your aureas, you have your taikons, you have your mints. These are all cultivated plants that have been specifically propagated to display these specific mutations, which is why my Monstera albo might look very similar to yours and vice versa, but of course the variegation patterns are always going to be slightly different. So it is important to understand that this type of variegation is very spontaneous and it just kind of happens, and it is part of the natural process of the plant for whatever reason. So that's why it's also really important if you have a variegated plant to make sure you're giving it enough light, because those variegated parts of the plant cannot photosynthesize. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully now you guys can understand that sport variegation really isn't any different than the other types of variegation we're used to seeing. I'm using my Monstera obviously as an example because it's a very, very easy plant to use as an example. It looks very similar to the albos and the taikons, but it is technically not. And this one that I have actually that I got at Lowe's is a large form, not a small form. Most albos on the market are Borsigiana and not actually Deliciosa. So that just makes her even more unique and more rare because variegated large forms are expensive, and I was very excited to find this little sporty sport. So now you guys know, next time I am plant shopping, or next time you're plant shopping, or somebody says something to you about sport variegation or just this type of chimeral variegation in general, you will know exactly what it means and you will know exactly how it happens. The next type of variegation that I want to explain to you guys is actually reflective or blister variegation. And I've done a full in-depth video about this one before, but just to keep it simple, it is silver variegation. So anytime you see silver variegation on a leaf, even if it's the veins on your anthurium, the silver on your syndapsis, that is called reflective or blister variegation. And it gets its name because it is actually caused by little air pockets getting trapped in the leaf tissue, which then reflect light. And when it reflects that light back to us, it appears silver. So this is actually one of my favorite types of variegation. I think it's really interesting and really unique and really cool, and it is stable. So this type of variegation is not the type that you have to worry about going anywhere. Your syndapsis is not going to suddenly just turn green. It is a part of the genetics of the plant. It's part of the genotype, which is the DNA. The phenotype is what the features that we actually physically see. So this one affects like the actual genotype of the plant. So this is the type of variegation that is stable. You do not need to worry about this going anywhere. It is in the DNA of the plant. Your syndapsis is not going to randomly revert back to green anytime soon. The third type of variegation that I want to quickly explain to you guys is transposon variegation. And this is a stable type of variegation that causes the leaves to be splashy. So you'll definitely have certain plants where it is just kind of part of their DNA. Okay, editing Jackie, hopping in because I feel like I didn't explain this one enough. The best examples for this one are going to be the things I'm showing on screen, the Ficus teneki, Aglaonema, some of the really common variegation patterns that we're used to seeing in plants, but every leaf is not necessarily a photocopy of the others. So every leaf is always going to have variegation because it's written into the genetic code of the plant. That's what makes it stable. If you propagate it, you're still going to have variegation. It's never going to go anywhere. It is part of the plant. Even some Hoya have this type of variegation where you know exactly what the leaf is going to look like, or at least you have an expectation of what each leaf is going to look like. So that is what differentiates it as well from chimeral variegation, which is unstable, spontaneous genetic mutation. So let's get into the next one. And last but certainly not least, another one of my favorite types of variegation is actually called pattern gene variegation, and this is probably best described by looking at calathea, when you have every single leaf has the same exact pattern on it. So this again is just written into the DNA of the plant. It is stable, it's not going anywhere. So those three types of variegation, the reflective or blister variegation, transposon variegation, and pattern gene variegation, are all considered to be stable. They are part of the plant. It doesn't really matter what you do, how much light you give, all of those different things is not going to impact how much variegation is present on these types of plants. The one that pretty much encompasses majority of the plants that we think about when we think of variegation is the first one that we discussed today. So hopefully you can walk away from this video understanding at least some of the basic differences between them. But I really wanted to hone in and focus on the first one, the chimeral variegation, because again, that is the umbrella in which sport variegation is going to fall under. So now hopefully you guys know exactly what it means, and if you guys want to know exactly what to look for and how to actually effectively sport hunt, let me know in the comments below, and I am happy to do another in-depth video discussing how to find sport variegation and how to know whether or not it's even worth buying a plant when you do find sport variegation, because sometimes it's just one little splitchy splotch on a leaf and that's it. There's no more on the rest of the plant. So I love you guys so very much. I hope you're having a beautiful day wherever you are out there in the world. Don't forget to spread kindness. Don't forget to drink some water, and I hope I see you guys in the next one.